Okay, so you've just bought a medieval bank, a table by the street, a strongbox, a ledger, and a room full of other people's money, popes and princes who owe you and who have to mind how they speak to you. Sounds like a good life. It isn't, not exactly. Because the church has already forbidden the one thing every bank is supposed to do. Time belongs to God alone. A man who charges for it is selling something that was never his to sell. Lending at interest has a name in 1400, and the name is sin, punishable, in the worst case, by a refused burial and a stripped inheritance. So here's the real question sitting underneath your new business, the one that decides whether it survives its first year. How do you get rich charging for time, in a world where charging for time is forbidden? Hold that question. The whole of what you're about to own is built to answer it, and the answer is stranger than you think. Let's open the doors and see what you've actually bought. What you own is not what you think. Start with the vault, because the vault is the lie. Picture the room. There's money in it, more than you were expecting. Almost none of it belongs to you. A medieval bank was never a pile of wealth, it was a pile of somebody else's money, and the entire art of the trade was making sure they never all came asking for it in the same week. Here's what that looks like in real numbers. A well-documented firm might hold 100,000 gold florins on deposit in a single office, while the entire capital of the firm, every branch, every partner, everything the owners actually put in, sits closer to 25,000. One office holding 4 times the whole firm's own money, and none of it yours to spend as you like. That is not a flaw in the design. That is the design. Your own capital is a thin cushion at the bottom. Everything stacked above it is a promise you have to be able to keep on demand, from people who can walk through your door on any given Tuesday. The second thing you're acquiring is a stranger, and it will matter more than you think. You are not buying a company, you are buying a term. A Florentine partnership had an expiry date written directly into the contract. The books closed, the partnership dissolved on schedule, the profits were counted, and only then did the partners decide whether to form a new one. 6 months' notice, and any partner could walk. So what you actually own isn't a building or a name. It's a contract that runs out, renewed only by people who have been watching how you performed. And the third thing, which will matter enormously later, is liability. It was joint, and it had no ceiling. Every partner stood behind the whole debt of the firm, not his fraction of it, the whole thing. Hold on to that fact. We come back to it, and it will not be a coincidence when we do. None of this machinery was new even in 1400. 2 centuries earlier, the Knights Templar ran something close to it across a chain of houses from London to the Holy Land. A pilgrim could deposit money in one country and draw it in another, and there was paperwork behind it, because we know of a complaint. A French nobleman deposited a sum with the Templars at Acre, went to withdraw part of it, and the officer on duty could find no record of the deposit at all. 4 days and one very angry escalation later, the money turned up. The system was already old. So was the ending. The Templar order was dissolved, and its assets were seized by the very men who owed it the most. File that away. It rhymes with something coming. The cost of getting in. What does it actually cost to become a named partner in one of these? Real capital first, not a token sum. A serious pile of gold coins, the kind ordinary households never touch in their lives. Wages, rent, bread, all of it moves in a lesser, everyday currency. The gold coin is reserved for international trade, dowries, and tax, which means the first thing your capital buys you is a category. You aren't opening a business that ordinary money can reach. Then, membership. You cannot deal in coins in a city like Florence without belonging to the Money Changers Guild. One more fee, one more set of rules, and we move on. The premises themselves are almost comically modest. A table, a cloth, a set of scales, a strongbox, and a ledger. That's it. The word for the table was the word that eventually became bank in half of Europe's languages. The most powerful financial institution on the continent, named in the end after a piece of furniture. There's also the float, and this is the cost nobody counts. You need cash sitting in the box doing absolutely nothing, because depositors turn up expecting it to be there. Money that sits still is money that earns you not one coin. It's a permanent, unrecoverable cost of being trusted, and it never goes away. Add it up and the picture is clear enough. This is not a business a clever poor man simply walks into. Entry is the first filter, and it's a hard one. One city is not a bank, one table, one strongbox. One city and a bank in one city is not really a bank, it's a moneylender with better furniture. Because here's the problem with everything you just built. All of it has to be bought again, in every new city you want to enter. Rome, then Venice, then Geneva, Milan, Bruges, London. Every one of them needs its own premises, its own clerks, its own partner on the ground whom you have to trust completely, and its own float, held in its own currency, doing nothing. That last point is worse than it sounds. Capital sitting idle in Bruges cannot answer a man standing at your table in Florence. Your dead capital doesn't pool, it fragments into as many pieces as you have cities. A second branch doesn't share your costs, it doubles them. The rooms, the wages, the coin you're legally required to leave sitting still. A third branch does it again. Now imagine carrying that arithmetic across 9 cities at once, against 9 sets of prices, 9 tax regimes, and 9 sets of officials who have all noticed you, and each of those cities holds a man with a key you will never personally watch him turn. Which brings us to what actually runs the network, and it isn't money, it's the post. Your inputs are 2 things, other people's deposits, and information. Deposits arrive at the table. Information arrives on a horse, weeks away in good weather, longer in a war. Every instruction you send is a decision made in the dark, orders about a market you can't see, carried out by a man you can't supervise based on prices that will have moved by the time your letter lands. So why open a branch at all, if it's this expensive and this blind? Because the branch isn't a cost center, it's the product. 2 tables in 2 cities that trust each other can do something a single table cannot do at any price. The man you cannot watch, which brings us to staff. And the strangest decision on the whole balance sheet. You do not put your branch managers on a wage. Think about the position you're in. Your man abroad is weeks away, sees every deal before you do, and long after you could possibly stop him. Pay him a fixed salary and he has no reason on earth to care what happens to your capital. He can watch you fail to count. So instead you make him an owner. He puts his own money into his own branch to take the job. His pay comes out of his share of that branch's profit. While the partnership runs, nobody draws a salary, nobody draws a dividend. Everyone waits for the books to close. The numbers are even tuned to sweeten it. A manager might put in a modest slice of a branch's total capital, but be handed a share of the profit larger than his stake alone would justify, the firm quite deliberately overpaying him for his own money, just to make sure his money was in the branch at all. It works, in the sense that it does exactly what it was designed to do. It gives you a man in a distant city who behaves like an owner. Here's the part that takes decades to arrive. It also gives you a man in a distant city who behaves like an owner with your capital, your name, and unlimited liability standing behind every decision he makes on an ordinary afternoon in a country you've never visited. That shape returns soon enough. Below him, meanwhile, you run the cheapest and slowest labor in the business. Teenage boys posted into foreign offices to learn the trade in a language they don't speak, on almost no money, years away from being trusted with anything that matters. Your training program is a decade long, and it produces roughly 1 usable man at a time. How the money actually moves, so far this looks like an extremely expensive machine for spending capital across 9 countries at once. Here's where it starts making it back. Ask anyone how a bank earns its living and you'll get the same answer: it lends at interest. Except you can't. We settled that at the start, so cross the obvious answer off the list and look underneath it. The first stream is the exchange itself. A merchant needs funds in a distant city and doesn't want to carry gold across hostile roads. He hands you money today. You write him a bill instructing your office abroad to pay him in the local currency on a fixed date. Whatever rate you set today is not the rate your office abroad will use when the bill matures, and that gap is your margin. Because currencies genuinely move, you can stand in front of any churchman in Christendom and say truthfully that you took a real risk. You didn't charge for time, you charged for exchange. The church accepted the distinction, and the whole of European finance was built inside it. Notice what does not happen here. Nothing travels. No cargo, no guard, no wagon, nothing anybody can steal on a road. The coin stays exactly where it is in both cities, and the profit happens anyway. That is the single most counterintuitive fact in this business. The safest fortune in medieval Europe was the one that never moved. Your depositors are the second stream, and you don't pay them interest either. You pay them a discretionary gift at year's end, out of gratitude, not a rate, not an obligation, and certainly not interest, since interest would be a sin. Everyone involved understood it was a rate anyway. People chose their bank based on how generous that gift reliably turned out to be. Step outside banking entirely for the third stream. Alongside the bank, a firm like yours might run a wool workshop or a silk workshop as an entirely separate company. Real output, sold to real courts, real customers. A slow year in finance need not be a slow year for the family. And the fourth stream is the one that quietly outweighs the rest. Somewhere there sits a great institution collecting money from every corner of the continent. Tithes, fees, dues, arriving in a dozen currencies, all flowing toward one court that has no way whatsoever of moving it. It has no branches, no bills, no clerks who can tell one currency from another. So it hires you. You hold its money, you move its money, and in the weeks between the day it arrives and the day it's spent, you lend it out. There's no need to charge interest on that money at all. You're also selling that same institution silk, jewels, and cloth, and you simply price the goods accordingly. The instrument itself. Let's slow down and walk one bill of exchange end to end, because this single instrument is the business, and almost nobody explains it properly. 4 people, 2 cities, 2 currencies, 1 fixed span of time. A merchant hands you money today. You write him a bill. Your office abroad will pay him in the local currency on an agreed date. That date isn't arbitrary. Every pair of cities had a customary settlement period everybody simply knew, and nobody argued about it. Now the rate. Whatever exchange rate the bill is written at, the currency may have moved by the time it matures. If it moves one way, he loses. If it moves the other, he wins at your expense. The risk is genuinely real in both directions, and that is precisely what makes the whole arrangement legal. But run the transaction back the other way and look at what you've actually built. You took money in one city today, you pay money in another city later. Somebody had the use of your funds for a fixed period and returned them with a difference on the end. That is a loan with a fixed term and a fixed return, wearing the clothing of a currency trade. And there was a version where the second leg of the trip barely happened at all. A bill went out, a matching bill came straight back to where it started. No goods moved, no merchant traveled, and money had simply been rented out at a price. Everyone understood this. It held for 4 centuries anyway, because the risk was technically genuine, and nobody could prove otherwise. The thing that cannot survive by now, this looks like a machine that prints money, and for a good run it genuinely was. Here is the thing it cannot survive. Your best customers are the people you have the least power over. A merchant who doesn't pay can be sued, seized, blacklisted, ruined. A king who doesn't pay is still a king. It has happened before. Great Florentine houses grew to rival any bank in Europe, with dozens of branches and enormous capital, lending vast sums to a king waging a foreign war. He defaulted. Both houses went down, though the honest version of that story is messier than the simple one, since war and revolt elsewhere had already been draining them before the default landed as the final blow. History repeated itself with a family that should have known better. Your man abroad, remember, the partner with a profit share judged on results, sitting weeks of post away from anyone who could stop him. That arrangement was the only thing that made a 9-city network possible in the first place. And the liability, remember, was joint and had no ceiling. So one bad decision in a distant city becomes your bankruptcy at home, arriving by letter, weeks after it's already too late to do anything about it. The design that built the bank is the same design that kills it. What actually survives? Could you get rich owning one of these? Yes, and it's a real yes, not a hedged one. This business made ordinary merchant families the richest in Europe, and bought them cities, courts, and centuries of art still standing today. But read the shape of it carefully. The banking made the fortune, and then the banking destroyed itself. What survived was everything the money had been converted into along the way: land, marriages, political power, buildings that are still standing. Every institution in this story eventually failed. The great houses failed. The order that pioneered the whole idea was dissolved and stripped by its own debtors. The greatest bank in Europe was wound down, branch by branch, and its family was thrown out of the city that made them. But the instrument outlived every single one of them. The bill of exchange, the trick built to charge for time without ever quite admitting it, kept working for centuries after the last of these houses closed its doors. And the argument that made it legal is still the argument every financial product makes when somebody asks whether it's really what it claims to be. You were never buying a bank. You were buying a seat at the table where that argument got invented, and the argument turned out to be worth more than the table.